Inside the temple of Abydos, on the north wall of a chamber that required a special permit to enter even in 1938, a carved inscription sits in white limestone describing a device. Not a ramp, not a sledge, not 10,000 men hauling rope. A device. One with identifiable components, a specific operational sequence, and a two-stage process for lifting stone that no published Egyptological analysis has ever fully explained. The inscription has been photographed. The photographs are in the Cairo Museum archive, and the permit to study it properly has been restricted for over 2 decades. That is where we begin. The problem with the official story. Here's the problem that mainstream Egyptology has never actually solved, and I want to be precise about this, because the official story sounds reasonable until you look at the numbers. 2.3 million stone blocks, average weight 2.5 tons. Some of them weigh up to 80 tons, fitted together so tightly that a playing card cannot pass between them. No mortar, stone against stone. The base of the Great Pyramid is level to within 2 centimeters across its entire 230 meters length. The 4 sides align to true north, south, east, and west with an error of less than 1/20th of a degree. Let that sit for a second. Less than 1/20th of a degree. Modern surveyors working with laser equipment consider that a serious benchmark. The ancient Egyptians, according to the textbooks, did it with copper tools, wooden sledges, and a ramp system that, when you actually calculate the geometry required to reach the upper courses of the pyramid, would have needed to be longer than the pyramid itself and consumed more material to build than the pyramid contains. Engineers have run those numbers. The ramp theory does not survive them. Not comfortably. Not without assumptions that are never stated out loud in the classroom version. And here is the part that gets brushed past in every documentary that ends up on cable television at 2 in the morning. The precision is not uniformly distributed across Egyptian history. The oldest monumental stonework in Egypt is the most precise, not the newest. The oldest. Technology is supposed to improve over time. You start rough and you develop toward precision. Egypt runs in the opposite direction. The finest tolerances appear earliest. Later dynasties show progressively cruder stonework. Whatever produced the precision of the early period was not passed down. It was lost, or it was taken, which brings us to what the stone actually says about how it was done. The inscription, nobody published. The chamber is designated AS7 in the temple complex at Abydos. It sits in what is now called the Osirian section, the deeper, older part of the complex associated with the cult of Osiris. The walls are white limestone. The script is formal monumental hieroglyphics, the deep-cut, careful kind, not the cursive administrative shorthand used for work orders and delivery logs. This was meant to last. Someone carved this specifically because they wanted it to survive. Egyptologist Salim Hassan documented the chamber during his final survey season in 1938. His notes, held in the Cairo Museum archive under reference CG 8944, describe the north wall inscription as containing 3 registers of text and imagery. The top register is standard ceremonial content, figures in conventional poses, nothing unexpected. The middle register stopped him. His notes describe it as containing technical iconography inconsistent with the surrounding ceremonial context. That is the phrase. Inconsistent with context. And then he moved on. He filed the note and he moved on. In 2010, Egyptologist Aidan Dodson reviewed the Abydos inscriptions and noted the same register with the same language. Technical iconography, inconsistent with the surrounding ceremonial context. He did not pursue it either. I want to pause here for a moment because I find this genuinely astonishing. 2 credentialed scholars, decades apart, look at the same inscription, both describe it as technically anomalous, and both decide that the appropriate response is to write it down and walk away. That is not scholarship. That is a very expensive shrug. The middle register shows a device, not a god, not a symbol of divine power, not a metaphor. A device drawn in the same cross-sectional convention Egyptian draftsmen used when they wanted to show you how something worked on the inside. The same way they drew boats to show the interior hull structure. The same way they drew storage containers to show the layered contents. Cross-section means interior view. It means this is how it works in here. The device is a cylinder, open at the top, narrower at the base. The interior shows horizontal lines, the same convention used elsewhere in Egyptian technical drawing to indicate layered materials or internal compartments. Around the exterior of the cylinder are 8 curved projections, evenly spaced. And above the cylinder, separated by a gap of empty space, is a stone block. No ropes, no levers, no human hands. Empty space between the device and the block. That is what the inscription shows. That is what Salim Hassan saw in 1938 and called inconsistent with context. That is what has been sitting in the Cairo Museum archive for 86 years. Reading it as an engineering document, now I want to read this inscription the way an engineer reads a technical diagram, because that is what it is. And when you do that, 3 components emerge that together describe a complete operational system. The first component is the device itself, a cylinder with 8 curved projections, producing something outward in 8 directions. The Egyptians used curved projections to show vibration or emanation in their technical drawings. The same convention appears in depictions of sacred sound instruments, not decoration, emanation. The device is producing a field. The second component is the operational text immediately below the device depiction. The hieroglyphs use the verb sejit, meaning to cause to move by a process. The object being caused to move carries a determinative marker, the small symbol that tells you which category of thing you are talking about. The determinative here is the one used for heavy objects requiring mechanical assistance. Boats, obelisks, large stone structures. Not divine phenomena, not spiritual experience. The determinative for engineering tasks. And the result of the process is described using a phrase that translates most directly as suspended continuously. Not lifted and placed. Suspended continuously. Held in suspension and guided. That is a 2-stage process. Stage 1, activation. Stage 2, suspension. The block rises and remains suspended. And then a third stage that the inscription calls guidance, using a verb borrowed from the steering of boats. The suspended block is moved by guiding it, not by pushing it, not by pulling it, by guiding it through the field, the way a boat is steered through water. Gentle directional pressure. The field does the work. The third component is stranger still. The inscription describes what goes inside the cylinder. Egyptian technical texts describing devices consistently include a material description, the substance that makes the mechanism function. Here, the cylinder's contents are described using 3 terms in sequence. The first term is nephew, breath, air in motion. The second term is kika, transformation, change of state. The third term is inert, stone, specifically the stone of the pyramid blocks. Air in motion, change of state. Stone. The device takes moving air, causes it to change its relationship to stone, and the stone responds by rising. Now, I'm going to say something and I want you to hear it clearly. That is a description of acoustic levitation, the use of sound waves to overcome gravity's hold on a physical object. The ancient Egyptians did not have the word for sound wave. They had the word for breath in motion. The physics behind those 2 phrases is identical. The physics hiding in plain hieroglyphic sight. Let me stay on those 3 terms because they deserve more than a quick read-through. And honestly, once you see what they actually mean side by side, you cannot unsee it. Nephew, breath in motion. The Egyptians used this word in two contexts: literal respiration, the breath of a living body, and mechanically produced air movement, the forced output of a bellows, the directed flow through a furnace pipe. When Nefu appears inside a technical device description, it is not talking about anyone breathing. It is talking about air that a mechanism produces, directed, controlled, sustained. Not a metaphor, an input, keka, transformation, change of state. This term shows up in Egyptian metallurgical texts when a material crosses a fundamental threshold. Copper becoming bronze, sand becoming glass, ore becoming usable metal. It does not describe a surface change. It describes a change in how a substance relates to its environment at a basic level. The inscription is saying that the mechanically produced air causes stone to cross exactly that kind of threshold. And here is the only question that matters when you read that. What relationship does stone have that moving air could plausibly alter? There is only one answer: gravity. The inscription is saying the air in motion changes how stone relates to gravity. That is the threshold being described. That is the crossing. Inert, stone. And not stone in general. Not rock as landscape or cliff face or riverbed. The specific determinative attached here is the one used for dressed pyramid blocks, the finished, cut, placed blocks of monumental construction. The inscription is not speaking in abstractions about stone as a concept. It is describing what happens to a specific category of object when the device runs. That specific object, the pyramid casing block, changes its gravitational state and rises. So let us put all three together without any interpretation layered on top. Mechanically produced air, fundamental change of gravitational state, pyramid block. That is the sequence. That is what the hieroglyphs say in the order they say it, using the standard technical vocabulary Egyptian scribes used when they were writing about mechanisms and materials and processes. Not gods, not ceremonies, not poetry. You do not need a physics degree to understand what that sequence describes. You do not need specialist training in Egyptology. You need one thing: a willingness to read what is actually written on the wall instead of reaching past it for what the official framework insists should be there. The words are not ambiguous. The grammar is not unclear. The sequence is not damaged. It is just inconvenient. And inconvenient in Egyptology has a long history of getting filed away and walked past. The modern labs that confirmed it. Acoustic levitation is not a theory. It is not pseudoscience. It is a demonstrated laboratory phenomenon with peer-reviewed published research and multiple independent confirmations across 4 decades of modern physics. In 1987, researchers at NASA's Jet Propulsion Laboratory in Pasadena, led by Dr. Eugene Trin, used acoustic standing waves to levitate liquid droplets and small solid objects aboard a space shuttle mission. Sound waves bouncing between two surfaces created a stable pressure field. The objects floated. Gravity did not stop working. The sound field created an upward pressure that balanced it. The objects hovered. That was 1987. That is not new science. That is nearly 40 years of confirmed physics. And I mention that date specifically because I want you to notice that Salim Hassan documented the A7 inscription 49 years before that NASA experiment. He was looking at a description of the same phenomenon nearly half a century before the phenomenon was demonstrated in a modern laboratory. He called it inconsistent with context and filed his notes. In 2014, a team at the University of Tokyo, led by Dr. Yoichi Ochiai, published research in Applied Physics Letters demonstrating 3-dimensional acoustic levitation. Not just lifting objects, moving them. An array of speakers created a standing wave field with pressure nodes, the points of lowest pressure where objects collect naturally within the field. By adjusting the phase relationship between the speakers, the nodes shifted. And when the nodes shifted, the objects followed. Smooth, continuous repositioning through mid-air. No contact. No mechanical connection. Phase adjustment. Node shift. Object follows. If you are keeping score at home, that is suspension and guidance. The exact two-stage process the Abydos inscription describes, and the guidance verb in the inscription, the one borrowed from boat steering, is the correct description of what is physically happening. You do not push the object. You shift the node. The object follows because the physics of the field requires it to. Gentle pressure. Continuous control. In 2019, a team at the University of Bristol, led by Dr. Asir Marzo, demonstrated acoustic levitation of objects weighing up to 70 grams using high-intensity ultrasonic arrays. 70 grams is not a pyramid block. I am not going to pretend otherwise. The honest version of this argument does not require me to, because what the Bristol team also published was the scaling relationship. The relationship between power input and mass that can be levitated is linear. Double the power output of the array. Double the liftable mass. The theoretical upper limit of acoustic levitation using current technology is not a fixed ceiling. It is a function of how much energy you can put into the field. The question is not whether acoustic levitation can lift heavy objects. The physics says it can. The question is whether the ancient Egyptians had a device capable of generating the required acoustic field at the scale the pyramid blocks demand. The Abydos inscription describes a cylinder with 8 curved projections producing a field outward in 8 directions. 8 evenly spaced acoustic emitters arranged around a central resonating chamber. The geometry that shouldn't match. Let me explain why the number 8 matters so much here, because this is the part that makes acoustic engineers go quiet when you put the inscription in front of them. When you design a levitation array, you are trying to create a stable standing wave field. A standing wave field requires interference patterns. Interference patterns require multiple wave sources, whose outputs overlap in predictable geometry. The geometry of the emitter array determines the geometry of the field, which determines the stability and controllability of what you can levitate inside it. Modern acoustic levitation arrays use specific emitter counts and arrangements depending on the application. For three-dimensional stable control of an object, the geometry that produces the most stable and most steerable field is a radially symmetric arrangement, emitters evenly spaced around a central axis. And the count that balances field uniformity with phase control resolution, the count that acoustic engineers arrive at through calculation and testing, is 8. An octaphonic emitter array. 8 sources. Evenly spaced. Radially symmetric around a resonating central cylinder. That is what the Abydos inscription depicts. The person who carved that inscription into white limestone at Abydos 3,300 years ago either independently derived the optimal geometry for a three-dimensional acoustic levitation array, or they were recording a device that already existed and already worked. Those are the two options. There is not a third one that makes the geometry coincidental. And if the geometry was not coincidental, then what was the device, who built it, and where did the knowledge come from? The inscription answers the last question directly, in its final register. We will get to that. But first, we need to talk about why you have never heard any of this from an official source. The suppression timeline. The suppression of this specific line of inquiry runs in 4 distinct layers. And I want to be precise about each one because the pattern across all 4 is not coincidence. The first layer begins inside Egyptian history itself. Around 1336 BCE, the pharaoh Akhenaten died. His successor Horemheb launched a systematic campaign to remove Akhenaten's name from temple walls across Egypt. This is documented. It is taught in universities. What is not taught is the specific category of content that went with the name. Akhenaten had attributed the construction knowledge at Giza and elsewhere to the pre-dynastic builders, beings he called the Shemsu Hor. He described a power source for moving stone in his own inscriptions, using language that overlaps directly with the terminology in the AS7 panel. After his death, every monument referencing pre-dynastic construction technology was subject to erasure. Not just his theology, the technical claims. The priests chiseled the knowledge out of stone with the same tools that stone had survived for centuries. Someone decided that information was more dangerous than the pharaoh's name. The second layer is 391 CE. A Christian mob burned the Serapeum at Alexandria. The Serapeum held the largest collection of Egyptian technical manuscripts outside the temple libraries. The librarian Kakus had cataloged the holdings 2 centuries earlier. Among the documented categories were texts labeled methods of the first raising. Egyptologists who have studied the catalog entry believe that phrase refers to construction and lifting techniques. Those texts burned. We have the catalog description. The content is gone. The third layer is Napoleon's 1798 expedition to Egypt. The description de l'Egypte, the 23-volume scholarly survey published beginning in 1809, contains, in its first edition, detailed drawings of inscriptions from the Abydos temple complex, including sections of the AS7 north wall. Those drawings appeared in the first edition. A section was removed from the second edition, published in 1817. The removed section is listed in the index by plate number. The plates themselves are absent. Fewer than 30 libraries worldwide hold the complete first edition. Someone removed those pages between 1809 and 1817. That is not a printing error. The fourth layer is more recent and more specific. In 2008, a team of acoustic engineers from MIT filed a permit application to conduct acoustic resonance testing inside the King's Chamber of the Great Pyramid. They wanted to measure whether the chamber's dimensions produced standing wave frequencies, consistent with a levitation application. The application was denied by the Supreme Council of Antiquities, under Zahi Hawass. The denial letter cited potential acoustic damage to ancient surfaces. The King's Chamber is solid granite. Granite is one of the hardest naturally occurring materials on Earth. The idea that survey-level sound testing would damage it is not a credible engineering concern. It is not even a credible excuse. The permit was still denied. 4 layers. Different centuries. Different institutions. Different stated reasons. Same result. The specific question of whether ancient Egyptians used acoustic principles to move stone has been prevented from receiving a formal funded permitted scientific answer for over 2 decades of modern research. The pyramid chambers that confirm the field. Here is what makes this harder to dismiss than most alternative history arguments. The physical evidence is not just in the inscription, it is in the pyramid itself. The King's Chamber of the Great Pyramid is constructed from solid red Aswan granite. Its dimensions are approximately 10.5 meters by 5.2 meters, with a ceiling height of 5.8 meters. When a continuous tone is produced inside that chamber, the room's geometry generates a standing acoustic resonance at a specific frequency. That frequency is approximately 111 Hz. 111 Hz. That specific frequency is the frequency at which water crystallizes into geometric patterns, a phenomenon documented in modern semantics research, the study of how sound shapes matter. It is also the frequency at which granite begins to exhibit measurable piezoelectric response, meaning the stone itself produces a small electrical charge when vibrated at that frequency. The King's Chamber is not a coincidence of dimensions. It is a tuned resonant structure. Someone chose those exact measurements. Someone chose them to produce that exact frequency. Rudolf Gantenbrink, the German engineer who sent his robot Wep-Wawet up the southern shaft of the Queen's Chamber in 1993 and found a sealed door at 63 meters depth, documented the Queen's Chamber dimensions in his survey report. The Queen's Chamber produces its own acoustic resonance profile. Gantenbrink did not publish the acoustic implications of the chamber dimensions. In 2009, he applied for permission to return to the shaft with updated equipment and investigate further. Denied. He stated publicly that he believed the shaft and the sealed door behind it were connected to a function of the Queen's chamber that current Egyptological theory did not account for. He was never permitted to investigate. Not once since 2009. The doors are still there. The chambers are still tuned. The resonance is still in the stone. What the inscription's final line says. Now here is the final line of the AS7 inscription, the one that every partial translation either stops before or renders as too damaged to read. In 2019, an independent researcher accessed high-resolution photographs from the Cairo Museum archive and examined the lower register of the AS7 north wall. The official position, repeated in Hassan's 1938 notes and in every reference to the chamber since, is that the lower register is damaged and unclear in its final section. The photographs show otherwise. The final section is intact, not damaged, complete. The limestone is clear. The hieroglyphs are cut clean. And they read as follows. This is the secret of the first builders, carried from the time before the flood, not to be shown to those who were not initiated. The first builders, not Khufu, not Seti, not Ramesses. The first builders, a designation that appears in Egyptian texts to refer to a civilization that predates the historical dynasties. The beings Akhenaten called the Shemsu Hor, the same beings listed in the Turin King list as rulers of Egypt for periods measured in centuries before the count of pharaohs began. The device in the Abydos inscription is not a new kingdom invention. The text says so explicitly. It was inherited. It was carried forward from an earlier civilization, preserved by the priests, passed down through restricted initiatory knowledge, and carved into the wall of a chamber that was sealed around 1300 BCE, specifically so it would survive. Someone knew this knowledge was fragile. Someone knew it could be lost. They sealed it in stone because stone lerts. And they were right. What the stone is still waiting for. Here is where we land, and I want to be direct about this, because I think the honest version of this argument is more compelling than the inflated version. I am not telling you the ancient Egyptians had electricity. I am not telling you they had computers, or frequency synthesizers, or any technology that maps cleanly onto what we have today. The Abydos inscription is not a modern physics textbook. It is a technical record produced by people who understood a phenomenon empirically, through observation and practice, across generations of working application, without the mathematical framework we use to describe the same phenomenon now. What I am telling you is this. The inscription describes a cylinder with 8 evenly spaced projections, producing a field outward in 8 directions. That is the geometry of an octaphonic acoustic emitter array. The inscription describes a 2-stage process of suspension and guided repositioning of heavy stone blocks. That is the operational protocol of modern acoustic levitation. The inscription describes the mechanism's inputs as breath in motion causing stone to change its state. That is a pre-mathematical description of what acoustic standing waves physically do to matter. The king's chamber is a tuned resonant structure at 111 Hz. That frequency is acoustically and piezoelectrically significant to granite specifically. The chamber that contains the inscription is restricted. The photographs are archived. The permit to study it formally has not been issued. 2.3 million stone blocks, average weight 2.5 tons. Fitted to tolerances that modern laser-equipped masons would call impressive. If the builders used a device that created an acoustic standing wave field capable of suspending stone and guiding it into position, the precision is not a mystery. A block lowered through a controlled standing wave field does not scrape against its neighbor. It settles. It is guided by the physics of the field into exact contact with the course beneath it. The tolerances are a consequence of the method. They are what you would expect. They are what you get. The inscription is still carved into white limestone on the north wall of AS7 at Abydos. The cylinder with 8 projections is still there. The 2-stage operational text is still there. The final line about the first builders and the time before the flood is still there, intact, visible in photographs that sit in the Cairo Museum archive right now. The king's chamber is still resonating at 111 Hz. The queen's chamber shafts are still sealed. The MIT acoustic survey permit is still denied. The independent researcher who photographed the lower register in 2019 still cannot get formal access to the chamber for a follow-up study. And the pyramid is still standing. 2.3 million blocks, not one playing card between them. Still waiting, after 4,500 years, for someone with the right permit and the right question to walk into that chamber and read the inscription the way it was meant to be read. Not as mythology, not as ceremony, not as inconsistent with context, as engineering documentation. Because that is what it is. That is what it has always been. And the answer to how the pyramid was built has been carved into limestone at Abydos this entire time, sealed behind a permit that keeps not being issued, in a chamber that keeps not being opened, describing a device that keeps not being studied. The stone does not forget. The stone is not waiting for us to believe it. The stone already knows. It is just waiting for us to ask.